for the start, I'm going to sit now with my guests here. So, Carrie in Montreal, can I see the Montreal screen, please? Yeah, Carrie, raise your hand, please, so everybody can no, yeah. So, Carrie from Fresh Air Educators. My first question would be to you, because so many times education and licensing to users or hobby droners or commercials has been mentioned. And of course, when I looked at the website of Fresh Air Educators, I would have chosen the snowmobile course because I found that very interesting. So you do everything out there. So please tell us, which kind of courses do you offer, and why is it so essential what you do as support for the whole public awareness of the drone industry?
Great. Well, thanks, Alexander, and want to also extend a thank you to Matthias and his team, Christina, Hannes, for just the opportunity to connect here. I'm learning a lot, and it's an exciting industry. Obviously, it's nice to work on something. Obviously, our background with off-highway vehicles, snowmobiles, boats, sailing, and certainly firearms training. We've run the gamut in terms of delivering training in those sectors, but largely that was a lot of in-person training that was looking to move online. They wanted to be a bit more flexible. They wanted to be a bit more convenient, more affordable, and I would argue that a lot of that training is a lot more effective, especially with a lot of the scenario-based training that we're creating now. We're using a lot of multimedia, we're using a lot of animation, and you can see that it gives us great flexibility. A lot of these topics, and I think when we look at training and testing for drones in particular, a lot of the key areas when we talk about risks, those travel around the world, and they're global in nature. We heard earlier from the regulators, from Raymond on the German side, from Ryan and on the Canadian side, and you can see that there's a lot of regulators who are, in a lot of ways, they're chasing this technology, and we're confident that they will catch them, and that they'll get the right regulations in place that will give the general public just the confidence that we can properly leverage this technology, because you got to see a sneak peek of some of this amazing technology the things that we can do. And so part and parcel, and that comes, I would call it, interactive, engaging, reasonably priced, effective training that produces great learning outcomes for our students. And so we've got a track record as Fresh Air Educators, having done that globally around the world with some partners in Europe, namely in Germany. Got to spend some time in Heidelberg this summer working with the manufacturer that's doing what we would call blended learning, a combination of online training plus in-person testing and coaching. So we look forward to working with this industry to deliver really effective, interactive, and engaging training that will ultimately allow us to achieve the economic potential for drones in both Canada and Germany.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a good start. And allow me one more, because when it's a kind of a little bit of an intercultural exercise to talk about testing. In a German context, we're used to very sort of strict testing and marks and, strong, strict teachers. And in Canada, you differentiate between online testing and in-person testing. Could you tell us a little bit what is the value of the one and the other?
Sure. So actually, a bit of background, we got pulled into this industry through the Small UAV Coalition, and it's a group of some pretty heavy hitters in this industry. AirMap, who's joined us today, is part of that, but it's Walmart, Google, Intel, etc. And Regulation came into place in the United States last year for in-person testing, and that in-person testing is a knowledge test. You essentially show up in person and take an online test, and it costs $150, and it's sort of needless. So we've been working with that group to educate the FAA on some other possibilities there. There isn't a training component to that, so it's difficult for pilots to understand when they'd be ready to show up and take this test, and we're seeing one of the fears that Ryan had, just low compliance. So certainly FAA didn't implement that testing regulation to have it circumvented, but the industry is just not responding to it. It's sort of needlessly expensive. It's you're doing something in person you could easily be doing online. So hopefully we're learning a little bit from that, and I think as in terms of the value there, certainly we can do something that's a lot more reasonably priced. In-person testing at $150, it might be a third of that if that were to be done online. But just also to meet with the industry and with the regulators to show them that it can still be done with a high level of integrity. Whether that's an online proctoring system or whether that's a required training component. There's things that we can do to ensure that it's still flexible and effective, but also reasonably priced.
All right, thank you, Kerry. We will come back to you in the second round of our panel discussion. I would like to turn now to Michael from Hanseatic Aviation Solutions. You have your mic? Yes, and it's working. Okay. Michael, a lot of the testing or instruction, that's what is called the hobby droners. You're not a hobby droner. You are a commercial droner.
Yes, that's right.
And Hanseatic Solutions, Aviation Solutions, first of all, what do you offer as a commercial drone producer, whatever?
We design and manufacture fixed-wing drones, they look like airplanes, in a range up to 5 kilogram maximum takeoff weight. This is our working horse, electric-driven, and then we have also another system, also fixed-wing drone up to 25 kilogram, with a combustion engine with 3.6 meter wingspan, and this is more for strategic projects.
And which companies or state agencies is booking your services, and for what reason? What do your drones work for your clients?
Yeah, we cover with our platforms, and this is just the platform, this is just one part. We integrate different payloads, cameras, laser scanners, and so on. Also special sensors for mineral exploration. And so our customers coming from this industries, mineral exploration, mapping, and also more and more from search and rescue application.
Yeah, about rescue we will talk also later. And right now you have I have to look it up. You have a running research and development project. It's called LAROS or LAROS? Or?
Yeah, it's LAROS. I think
LAROS.
it's kind of broad in the time, yes. Mm-hmm. And it stands for, it's a German acronym, it stands for assistance by drones of rescue operations over the sea. So our bigger SUV, the S360, is customized for this special maritime search and rescue application, and we are flying in very harsh environments, also facing challenges like flying beyond visual line of sight, and so on. Yeah.
And what are your expectations of that project?
Yeah, at the end, I think we have a unique system in Europe, and we have a pilot customer in Germany, and want to then deploy this system worldwide and find other customer for this, I would say, very special system.
Okay. I will also come back to you and also talk more about your interest already existing corporations with Canada. Going back to Montreal, Alexis from Infotech Technical Services. Talking to you before the conference, hi there. Our editor, you are somehow for me a bridge to last year's German-Canadian concourse, because then we talked about ocean and big data and with our partners in Halifax, and it was a lot about how do we get ships, not sheep, but ships. How do we get ships safely through the northern seas and the ice-covered oceans, and you work on that with satellite technology and data, but also with drones. Please tell us a little bit more about the work you do when you do navigation with drones.
Certainly, Alex. Actually, maybe a bit of context first. So, Infotech is a subsidiary of FedNav, a shipping company within the fleet. They have a 3 high ice class icebreaker. They're the only vessels navigating in the Canadian polar waters year-round. And what we do at Infotech is we provide navigation support to ships that go into ice-infested waters. So we support our parent company, of course, but we support marine operations across all sorts of sectors across the globe, and also in the Arctic and the Antarctic. So we support ships in the oil and gas industry, seismic, Navy, Coast Guard, and even the tourist and cruise industry. And navigation support in ice, why is that important? Well, because ice is not homogeneous. There's immobile, land-fast ice along the shore and in bays and so forth, but a lot of the ice just moves around all the time. It's very dynamic and it's not homogeneous. It can be loosely packed, it can be closely packed under pressure, it can vary in thickness and in strength and density. And the difference between taking route A versus route B is one route might be very efficient, you're moving swiftly, you're burning less fuel. Route B you might actually slow down, you might get stuck for a few hours, for a few days, and depending on your vessel, you might actually damage the hull with all that entails. So it's very crucial when you navigate in polar water to have the best possible information to navigate. And the way we do this at Infotech is we have, one of the ways at least, is we have a product and some supporting services. IceNav is our own ice navigation system. It's a shipboard system. So it uses live enhanced ice radar, but as you mentioned, it also uses things like satellite imagery and ice charts. And that's what we learned. And actually earlier today in our keynote presentation from Airbus, I kind of like the slide there with the satellites and the drones and the different layers. And that's what it comes down to for us is complementarity of information. So the ice radar is great. You get a good live view of what's going on near the vessel. But the range is limited, and that's where other sources of information become interesting. So satellite imagery, for instance, or ice charts. So ice charts are great, but they're dated by nature. Somebody has to prepare the chart, and they base it on satellite information that itself is dated. So satellite information is better. Well, it's not necessarily better, it's a great complement. So you don't get all the interpretation done by the experts, but it's dated. Sometimes the ship slows down, so you might use your best efforts to try to predict where the ship's going to be to acquire an image, but then the vessel has to slow down because of bad weather or heavy ice and so forth. Now your satellite image is no longer useful to you. So that's where we started to look at drones a few years ago, just to see, while these things can provide a live feed of what's going on ahead of the vessel, let's see what can be done. So at first we just started by thinking, well, let's just bring a selection of drones that we can find different types and so forth, put them on the ship, send them out and see what happens. And we were kind of inspired. I mean, we got back from that, very compelling footage of the shipwreck and nice, beautiful pictures, but very little actual meaningful navigation data. So we went to work right away, and then instead we started to write down requirements about what exactly do we want out of this kind of technology. And so we found some solutions, but then when it came down to actually delivering the merchandise, so it did work to a certain extent, but it also fell short than others. And so we're getting better at this. I mean, we've done a few iterations now, but we're still looking for the ultimate solution. I think we're not there yet. So the good thing though with UAV, the UAV industry, it's very effervescent. There's tons of people that are working on all sorts of technology and research and so forth. And also it's evolving rapidly. So So I hope that today some people are hearing my little presentation and are feeling inspired and are thinking, well, you know what, maybe I have the right technology. And so basically we have access to a unique platform. Those vessels, as I mentioned, they're the only one navigating in polar waters in the wintertime here in Canada. So if you think you have the right technology, you want to test it or you want to demonstrate it, then please reach out.
Okay, thank you. And you rightly opened the floor for calls for cooperation. So you're looking for companies looking for test areas in the polar ice regions, and you would be more than welcome to offer your ships for the testing, right?
Certainly, yes. So,
Are you
yes,
already
that is a
cooperating with the? Are you already cooperating with the German companies or universities or others?
Well, we have some service providers based in Germany, actually, but more on the imagery side. But no, we're not collaborating with Germany at present, but we're certainly open to it.
Okay, I already saw some nodding here in Berlin, and I'm sure someone is coming back to you. But I would like to turn now to, thank you. We will turn now to Rainer here on the Berlin part of the podium. Please take a microphone so that we and our partners. Rainer Stemme, yeah, it's on. Your company, some of our Berlin guests have been already informed about your work because you arranged the site visit this morning here in Berlin. And during your life as entrepreneur, you have worked quite a lot with special sailing ships and airplanes, and now you are in the drone business. What is fascinating you about drones?
It happened to me that I started my aviation life with a high-end powered glider, motor glider. And then people came over to me to ask me, could we use it for, as an example, in the Himalayan, to look for the Mount Everest structure and turbulences in the air and so on, so step by step. And then one of our projects has been then with a French company to set up what I think one of the first dual mode, or with other words, OPV, optionally piloted vehicles in the 1-ton class. Then last 3 years were developed in Berlin, respectively close to Berlin. We developed a 3-ton aircraft for the state of Qatar, for the Qatar Armed Forces. They have the demands on items like watching their gas platforms in the Gulf. They want to see what's going around. They want to see anyway what's going in the Gulf, smuggle and whatever, and technical infrastructure and things like this. So we developed 2 prototypes in the last 2 years, and it's now going ahead into production for the state of Qatar. And then Qatar wants to set up industrial capacity in this business. And of course, we'll run immediately into our German export license issues. So this is what I have done the last 3 years. And some month ago, I established, and I sold half of the company. I sold half of the company to a Qatar investment company. But the way I am made, I established a new company now, just in this very moment, half a year ago. And what we do now is again platforms for the, I wonder how to call it, for the 1-ton class and 3-ton class. So compared to our drones we talk about today, the big ships. Yeah, 300 kilogram payload typically, or 1-ton payload. That's what we'll start in the very moment again.
And these big ships, as you call them, the big drones, the big guys, what will be their job compared to their little brothers and sisters?
The big ones, like these 3 tons, we negotiate with DHS in the USA, Homeland Security. They have a lot of tasks on the land, on the when they do not want to build this wall to Mexico, they can do it with watching it from aircraft, of course. They want to see the Caribbean Sea again, smuggle and all these things. So that's typical tasks. On the other hand, other customers, state of Kazakhstan has 50,000 kilometer pipeline, 50,000 kilometer. Of course, partly you can watch it with small drones, but it's even an issue to go every 2 days, all the full line. This can be tasks. Morocco as a state has more than 2,000 kilometer coastline. They know nothing what happens in the south of the country. All these are tasks for. So big areas or long lines, or keep it like a little satellite, 50 hours in the air over a special spot.
Thank you. And that's a little bit also, Michael, what your drones can do, no? With the pipelines and surveillance?
Yes, that's right. I think everything is a bit smarter on our side, but especially the S360 is also designed to do pipeline monitoring, power line monitoring, border control, but I would say on another level.
Mm-hmm. And you already have a cooperation going on with Canada. Can you tell me a little bit which companies, what's the goal of the cooperation, where it takes place?
Yeah, we have a cooperation with 2 companies from Nova Scotia since a couple of months or 2 years. One company is Tier 1 UAV Solutions. They are our, I would say, drone operator in Canada. And on the other hand, we have a company, Deep Vision, from Halifax. And I would say they bring the intelligence to our payload. And together, I think we are a quite good team, but this team is open for new partners.
And you also want to test your drones in colder areas, so Alexis will probably get an email from you after the conference, I suppose.
Yes.
Good. I would like to turn back to Montreal. And Carrie, coming back to this education aspect, there is a lot of debate about whether or not training and testing should be delivered together, and how that should be administered. And I'm sure on the German side we will have a debate about that too. What's your stake on that? And it would be great if, yes, we see you again. There you are. Hi.
Great. Well, our background has always been in training, and the training and testing to make them cohesive, obviously for consistency. And the nice thing about some of the new training that we're building, particularly in the drone space, is, you know, we're starting from scratch. You usually sort of inherit a curriculum. It's delivered in a certain way, and so now we're able to work with something fresh. But there's no question that it's hard when there's a disconnect between sort of who's doing the testing and who's delivering the training. You want to be as cohesive as possible. You want to have the same learning outcomes in mind, and you want to be looking for that consistency. And a lot of it boils down to, you know, effective training and learning objectives. And when you start getting into that sort of bad habit of teaching to the test, that's when, you know, the learning kind of loses its focus. So we like that focus on the teaching fundamentals and those proper learning outcomes. Obviously, you have to tie those directly to the assessments and make sure that everything's cohesive. So ideally, they're coupled together. That's ideal, and that's typically what the courses that we've built have been built collaborating. And anytime you separate them, there's usually a little bit of a disconnect there. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing with the FAA, that when we started working with the Small UAV Coalition, a lot of their members said, we don't have the training to take the tests. And FAA wanted to separate themselves and say, well, we're not going to, in the training game, we'll let, you know, vendors kind of chase this around, and it ended up taking us a while to kind of catch back up.
Okay, please stay at the podium, and Alexis, I would like to join Carrie there, because I would open up now for questions for the audience. These could be questions. Also, you can ask questions to each other or statements or a call for partners. This is very much Alexis. Yes, I see you.
Yeah, I just want to rectify something I said earlier, and I hope that they forgive me because I know there's some representative in the room. You asked earlier about collaboration with Germany. It's true we don't have any collaborators related to the UAV side, but we've actually been fairly successful with Airbus Space and Defense with satellite imagery for research, and that's true collaboration, and I would like to thank them. Sorry about that, people from Airbus, but please go right ahead with the question. Sorry about that, Alex.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay, any questions here in Berlin? And Christina, please also join the podium so that I can see you and know if there are questions in Montreal.
It's really getting crowded here.
Comments?
No questions right now? One question from
Yeah.
Montreal, Alex? Yeah.
I'm just going to wait as long as we have some questions. No problem about that.
We have a question, Alex. We're just trying out the ceiling microphone.
Yeah, take your time.
Yeah, let's see if it should work, yeah.
Should work. Yeah, I just have a question for Alexei. So what kind of information about ICE are you looking for to get with the drones?
Okay, well, that's a very good question, actually. Things that might impede navigation include ice ridges, for instance. So these are things you might want to avoid and you might want to be able to spot. Conversely, open water leads tend to make navigation a lot easier. So if a ship is being slowed down, for instance, you might want to be looking for where exactly those things are. The radar is a great tool to help you do that, but sometimes certain details are hard to interpret, and that's where we're going, looking at UAVs to see, how much extra information can be provided through that. Also, there are instances when the vessel might be entirely stopped, like I said, sometimes for hours or days. At that point, you've got the luxury to really, go out and scope out and see what things look like when they're close by. For instance, if you're stuck at an ice ridge, you might want to maybe survey the entire ridge, see if there's any flaws, that you might not be able to really discern from the vessel itself.
Okay, Christina, I have one question here from Raymond. If you get up, please.
Two questions, but very brief. One to Alexis. Have you looked into taking probes from ship emissions regarding the sulfur content, which is limited in a lot of coastal waters? Because that's a little bit of a topic right now here in Europe. And one question to Kerry. When you offer online training, how do you prevent fraud in the sense that the person who is answering the question is not a different person than that one who received the certificate or the license? Thank you.
Well, okay, so as far as taking probes of fumes coming off the vessel, no, we have not do that. The focus of Infotech is really enhancing navigation. This being said, it would seem like a good medium to actually take these kinds of sample, obviously. But no, we have not done that yet.
Great, thanks for the question. That's we work with, we've got 125 clients. They're all typically government agencies and obviously very sensitive to fraud detection. So, the sort of latest technology is the online proctoring system, and that's going to be a little bit more expensive, but it covers all those safeguards. Sort of to the idea that anything that you're looking to do in an in-person proctoring environment can be replicated online, whether that's use of a webcam to collect personal information. We can have a secure testing environment where we take over their machine when they're taking some of the certification tests. And you can even, if you wanted to, you could run certain personal information against databases if it's that critical. So we also have a number of other safeguards with a lot of our, when you tie the training into the testing, you don't get to take the test until you've been through that training program. And so, when it takes 5, 6, 7, or some of our firearms trainings, 10, 12 hours, it's a lot less likely that you can find an expert friend, family member that's willing to put in that kind of time to, circumvent the training testing on your end. So that's, I think, another critical component when you tie the two of them together. Certainly a deterrent, and things are moving in that space a lot. I'd say that's probably the thing we've seen, that certainly the training is moving more to scenario-based training, and that's a lot more application, much richer experience, and having a big impact on retention. And we're seeing the testing mechanisms really move a lot. You know, you're seeing a lot of master's level courses being delivered online and needing some you know, deeper safeguards to validate that. So we've been working with a number of partners in that regard, and a couple of really good ones in Canada, actually. So.
Thank you. Christina, do you have a question in Montreal?
No questions right now.
We have a question here. Could you please come a little bit to the front because of the camera? Thank you. And who are you asking?
Yeah, well, I just would like to ask you, you're talking about coastal areas, and it's very interesting that you're flying over the coastal areas, because I've seen quite recently in Italy, they have developed an air drone which even can be used as a submarine to pick up water probes. You know, because in the Mediterranean basin, it's very interesting to find out what's purity of water is there. So, have you already in mind to develop something, or is there already a drone which you can use to dive, let's up to 3 meters, and to pick up samples from water?
I guess that question goes to Alexis. Now just imagine.
Yes, I guess so. Now, one of the challenges that when you're dealing with sea ice is there's not necessarily a lot of open water. This being said, I know of autonomous machines that operate entirely underwater, and they're used a lot in research, but more close to my reality and the ship owning side. Some of my colleagues are also looking at small ROVs to do paint surveys under the vessels. It's a lot safer and less expensive than sending divers down there. But as far as something that can go up in the air and then down underwater, I've heard of things like that, but I've never seen them demonstrated. But it's certainly an interesting technology. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more question here.
This would also be a question to Alexis. It's relating to the last German-Canadian concourse, as Alexander was pointing out. There is a connection of Infotech to last year's topic. During last year, we had a presentation from Airbus presenting a project called Passages in cooperation with the Dalhousie University, where they demonstrated or presented a project to us used for navigation in the Arctic seas, a system that was merging different types of data, radar satellite data, ice charts, and so on. They presented this last year, and there was a mentioning that FatNav would use a similar system developed by Infotech on boards of their vessels. My question would be, when you're talking about using drones for a better situational awareness, is that something that you would try to include into such a comprehensive system to have like a complete picture of navigation when you're going through the Arctic seas?
That is a very good question, and absolutely. And the main reason for that is that one thing we've noticed is that when you actually provide, for instance, a live feed of what's going on ahead of the vessel from a UAV, you sometimes see things, okay, well, I see an ice ridge there, I see an open water leak, but sometimes it's kind of hard to intuitively and right away tell for the navigation crew, well, okay, so the lead is on the screen, is there, so I need to change my heading this way and that way. And we believe that by incorporating information taken from UAVs into a more complete navigation systems that merges data from radar, from satellite imagery, from charts, and so forth, that this can certainly help. And we've actually done that to a certain extent by being able to display where the UAV is located on our system while having the live feed on the side, and that certainly helps. But again, I think there's room for improvement there. For instance, being able to take, for instance, still pictures and georeference them in your real time so you can overlay them directly on the display might be something to look at.
Thank you. And Christina? Somebody raising his hand or her hand?
No questions, Alex.
No
No questions left. Okay, that will close that part of our conference. Thank you very much to Carrie and Alexis, and to Michael and Rainer here for your presentations and answers. Thank you very much.